Hi, this is Oliver. I hope you're well wherever you are. Today, I'm going to read to you from Computer Lib and Dream Machines by Ted Nelson. Whatever field you're in, whatever your interests are, I would recommend reading or listening to anything you can by Nelson. His mode of thinking is radically different from most people, and he's a true innovator. For example, he was, I think, the first person to imagine or to invent the idea of hypertext. He at least coined the word. His vision for the technology that the web, that niche that the web occupies, his vision for what that could be, is far more profound and interesting. And he's an old guy, but he's still alive and still sharing ideas. The book from which I'm going to read is two books in one: Computer Lib and Dream Machines, both published in 1974. The former is an assessment of that present and the risks and limitations that Nelson saw in the way people were thinking. And the latter, Dream Machines, is a vision for what he believed that we could achieve, what dreams we might dream, and what we might build thus. It's two books in one, like I mentioned, and each book has an introduction, and I'm going to read to you both introductions. So, let's get into it. Computer Lib. Any nitwit can understand computers, and many do. Unfortunately, due to ridiculous historical circumstances, computers have been made a mystery to most of the world. And this situation does not seem to be improving. You hear more and more about computers, but to most people it's just one big blur. The people who know about computers often seem unwilling to explain things or to answer your questions. Stereotyped notions develop about computers operating in fixed ways, and so confusion increases. The chasm between laymen and computer people widens fast and dangerously. This book is a measure of desperation. So serious and abysmal is the public sense of confusion and ignorance. Anything with buttons or lights can be palmed off to the layman as a computer. There are so many different things, and their differences are so important. Yet, to the lay public, they are lumped together as computer stuff, indistinct and beyond understanding or criticism. It's as if people couldn't tell apart a camera from exposure meter or tripod, or car from truck or toll booth. This book is therefore devoted to the premise that everybody should understand computers. It is intended to fill a crying need. Lots of people have asked me where they can learn about computers, and I have to say, nowhere. Most of what is written about computers for the layman is either unreadable or silly. Some exceptions are listed. But virtually nowhere is the big picture simply enough explained. Nowhere can one get a simple, soup-to-nuts overview of what computers are really about, without technical or mathematical mumbo-jumbo, complicated examples, or talking down. This book is an attempt. And nowhere have I seen a simple book explaining to the layman the fabulous wonderland of computer graphics which awaits us all, a matter which means a great deal to me personally, as well as a lot to us all in general. That's discussed on the flip side. Computers are simply a necessary and enjoyable part of life, like food and books. Computers are not everything. They are just an aspect of everything. and not to know this is computer illiteracy, a silly and dangerous ignorance. Computers are as easy to understand as cameras. I've tried to make this book like a photography magazine, breezy, forceful, and as vivid as possible. This book will explain how to tell apples from oranges and which way is up. If you want to make cider, or help getting things the right side up, you will have to go from here. I'm not a skillful programmer, hands-on person, or eminent professional. I am just a computer fan, a computer fanatic, if you will. But if Dr. David Rubin can write about sex, I can certainly write about computers. I've written this like a letter to a nephew, chatty and personal. This is perhaps less boring for the reader and certainly less boring for the writer who is doing this in a hurry. Like a photography magazine, it throws at you some rudiments in a merry setting. Other things are thrown in so you'll get the sound of them, even if the details are elusive. We learn almost every day things by beginning with vague impressions, but somehow encouraging these is not usually felt to be respectable. What I have chosen for inclusion here has been arbitrary, based on what might amuse and give quick insight. Any bright high school kid or anyone who can stumble through the details of a photography magazine should be able to understand this book and get the main ideas. This will not make you a programmer or a computer person, though it may help you talk the talk and perhaps make you feel more comfortable, or at least able to cope when new machines encroach on your life. If you get a chance to learn programming, it's an awfully good experience for anybody above 4th grade. But the main idea of this book is to help you tell apples from oranges and which way is up. I hope you do go on from here, and I've made a few suggestions. I'm publishing this book myself in this draft form to test its viability, to see how mad the computer people get, and to see if there is as much hunger to understand computers among all you folks out there as I think. I'll be interested to receive corrections and suggestions for subsequent editions, if any. The computer field is its own exploding universe, so I'll worry about up-to-dateness at that time. Summary of this book. Man has created the myth of the computer in his own image, or one of them. Cold, immaculate, sterile, scientific, oppressive. Some people flee this image. Others, drawn to it, have joined that cold, sterile, oppressive cult and propagate it like a faith. Many are still about this mischief, making people do things rigidly and saying it is the computer's fault. Still others see computers for what they really are, versatile gizmos which may be turned to any purpose in any style. And so a wealth of new styles and human purposes are being proposed and tried, each proponent propounding his own dream in his very own impersonal way. This book presents a panoply of things and dreams. Perhaps some will appeal to the reader. The computer priesthood. Knowledge is power, and so it tends to be hoarded. Experts in any field rarely want people to understand what they do, and generally enjoy putting people down. Thus, if we say that the use of computers is dominated by a priesthood, people who spatter you with unintelligible answers and seem unwilling to give you straight ones, it is not that they are different in this respect from any other professional. Doctors, lawyers, and construction engineers are the same way. But computers are very special, and we have to deal with them everywhere. And this effectively gives the computer priesthood a stranglehold on the operation of all large organizations, of government bureaus, and everything else that they run. Members of Congress are now complaining about the control of information by the computer people, that they cannot get the information even though it is on computers. Next to this, it seems a small matter in that ordinary companies, untrained, personnel can't get straight questions answered by computer people, but it's all the same phenomenon. It is imperative for many reasons that the appalling gap between public and computer insider be closed. As the saying goes, war is too important to be left to the generals. Guardianship of the computer can no longer be left to a priesthood. I see this as just one example of the creeping evil of professionalism, the control of aspects of society by cliques of insiders. There may be some chance, though, that professionalism can be turned around. Doctors, for example, are being told that they no longer own people's bodies. And this book may suggest to some computer professionals that their profession should not be as sacrosanct as they have thought either. This is not to say that computer people are trying to louse everybody up on purpose. Like anyone trying to do a complex job as he sees fit, they don't want to be bothered with idle questions and complaints. Indeed, probably any group of insiders would have hoarded computers just as much. If the computer had evolved from the telegraph, which it just might have, perhaps the librarians would have hoarded it conceptually as much as the math and engineering people have. But things have gone too far. People have legitimate complaints about the way computers are used and legitimate ideas for ways in which they should be used, which should no longer be shunted aside. In no way do I mean to condemn computer people in general. Only the ones who don't want you to know what's going on. The field is full of fine, imaginative people. Indeed, the number of creative and brilliant people known within the field for their clever and creative contributions is considerable. They deserve to be known as widely as, say, good photographers or writers. There you go. That's the introduction to Computer Lib. Remember, that came out in 1974. There were rudimentary graphical user interfaces back then, but Nelson's ideas about the use of screens and computer graphics would only really come into the public field 10 years later with the release of the Macintosh by Apple. And still today, we're experiencing these issues with people not quite being fully honest with us. This is to say that issues, problems, restrictions that are designed in by choice and with preference are presented as essentially laws of nature, that's just the way the computer is. And he identified this in 74. It's still an issue. We've made a lot of progress in some areas, but it's fascinating to see a primary source like this. So, dream machines. This is the flip side of Computer Lib. Feel free to begin here. The other side is just if you want to know more about computers, which are changeable devices for twiddling symbols. Otherwise, skip it. But if you want to change your mind, it might be fun to browse. In a sense, the other side has been a come-on for this side. But it's an honest come-on. I figure the more you know, the readier you'll be for what I'm saying here. Not necessarily to agree or to be sold, but to think about it in the non-simple terms that are going to be necessary. The material here has been chosen largely for its exhilarating and inspirational character. No matter what your background or technological knowledge, you'll be able to understand some of this, and not be able to understand some of the rest. That's partly from the hasty preparation of this book, and partly from the variety of interests I am trying to comprise here. I want to present various dreams and their resulting dream machines, all legitimate. If the computer is a projective system, or Rorschach inkblot, as alleged on the other side, the real projective systems, the ones with projectors in them, are all the more so. The things people try to do with movies, TV, and the more glamorous uses of the computer, whereby it makes pictures on screens, are strange inversions and foldovers of the rest of the mind and heart. That's the particular origami of the self. Very well, this book, this side, Dream Machines, is meant to let you see the choice of dreams. Noting that every company and university seems to insist that its system is the wave of the future, I think that it is more important than ever to have the alternatives spread out clearly. But the experts are not going to be much help. They are part of the problem. On both sides, the academic and the industrial, they are being painfully pontifical and bombastic in the jarring new jargons. Little clarity is spread by this. Few things are funnier than the pretensions of those who profess dignity, sobriety, and professionalism of their expert predictions, especially when they, too, are pouring out their own personal views under the guise of technicality. Most people don't dream of what's going to hit the fan, and the computer and electronics people are like generals preparing for the last war. Frankly, I think it's an outrage making it look as if there's any kind of scientific basis to these things. There is an under-level of technicality, but like the foundations of a cathedral, it serves only to support what rises out of it. The technicalities matter a lot, but the unifying vision matters more. This book has several simultaneous intentions: to orient the beginner in fields more complex and tied together than almost anybody realizes. Nevertheless, to partially debunk several realms of expertise which I think deserve slightly less attention than they get, and to chart the right way, which I think uniquely continues the Western traditions of literature, scholarship, and freedom. In this respect, the book is much more old-fashioned than it may seem at the gee whiz, very now level. The main ideas of this book I present not as my own, but as a curious species of revealed truth. It has all been obvious to me for some time, and I believe it should be as obvious as well to anyone who has not been blinded by education. If you understand the problems of creative thinking and organizing ideas, if you have seen the bad things school often does to people, if you understand the sociology of the intellectual world and have ever loved a machine, then this book says nothing you do not already know. For every dream, many details and intricacies have to be whittled and interlocked. Their joint ramifications must be deeply understood by the person who is trying to create whatever it is. Each confabulation of possibilities turns out to have the most intricate and exactly detailed results. This is why I am so irritated by those who think that electronic media are all alike. And each possible combination you choose has different precise structures implicit in it, arrangements and units which flow from these ramified details. Implicit in radio lurk the time slot and the program. But many of these possibilities remain unnoticed or unseen for a variety of social or economic reasons. Why does it matter? It matters because we live in media as fish live in water. Many people are prisoners of the media, many are manipulators, and many want to use them to communicate artistic visions. But today, at this moment, we can and must design the media, design the molecules of our new water, and I believe the details of this design matter very deeply. They will be with us for a very long time, perhaps as long as man has left. Perhaps, if they are as good as they can be, man may even buy more time, or the open-ended future most suppose remains. So, in these pages I hope to orient you somewhat to various of the proposed dreams. This is not meant to record the efforts of a few Brewster McClouds, each tinkering towards some new flight of fancy in his sensorium, but to bear in mind that hard-edged fantasy is the corner of tomorrow. The great American dream often becomes the great American novelty, after which it's a choice of style, size, and financial gain. I should say, after which it's a choice of style, size, and financing plan. The most exciting things here are those that involve computers, notably because computers will be embraced in every presentational medium and thoughtful medium very soon. That's why this side is wedded to the other. If you want to understand computers, you can take the first step by turning the book over. I figure that the more you know about computers, especially about mini computers and the way online systems can respond to our slightest acts, the better your imagination can flow between the technicalities, can slide the parts together, can discern the shapes of what you would have these things do. Brief interjection here. When Nelson refers to mini computers, he's describing something smaller than an enormous mainframe, but still very large by today's standards. Again, personal computing was just about emerging at this time. The computer is not a limitless partner, but it is deeply versatile. To work with it, we must understand what it can do, the options, and the cost. My special concern, all too tightly framed here, is that the use of computers to help people write, think, and show. But I think presentation by computers is a branch of showbiz and writing, not of psychology, engineering, or pedagogy. This would be idle disputation if it did not have far-reaching consequences for the designs of the systems we are all going to live with. At worst, I fear these may lock us in. At best, I hope they can further the individualistic traditions of literature, film, and scholarship. But we must create our brave new worlds with art, zest, intelligence, and the highest possible ideals. I have not mentioned emotions. Movies and books, music, and even architecture have, for all of us, been part of important emotional moments. The same is going to happen with the new media. To work at a highly responsive computer display screen, for instance, can be deeply exciting, like flying an airplane through a canyon, or talking to somebody brilliant. This is as it should be. The reason is, and by all rights ought to be, slave to the emotions. Bertrand Russell. In the design of our future media and systems, we should not shrink from this emotional aspect as a legitimate part of our fantic design. The substratum of technicalities and the mind-bending, gut-slamming effects they produce are two sides of the same coin. And to understand the one is not necessarily to be alienated from the other. Thus, it is for the wholeness of the human spirit that we must design. Thanks for listening.